Hey everyone, welcome back to the Woman of the Wise podcast. I'm Sammy and this is
Allison.
and we are joined here today by Kimberly Davis, who is going to walk us through a little bit through her journey, her love connection with Allison right away. And then we're also going to discuss a little bit about the body emotion connection and how our emotions can sometimes create that disease within our body.
I love it. Let's get to it. Oh, hey, Kimberly. Hey.
Hi.
So, so how do we find each other? Can you start us the beginning of your journey and how you got into healing yourself and what brought that adventure on and all that goody stuff?
How we found each other
You
was through wonderful YouTube, but the journey began way before that. Before that.
Yeah.
For me, and I had to look back through to figure it out, which is really interesting. Back in 2001, I started taking Qigong and Tai Chi classes with my mother. And that's where it began. And I should have had some inkling of where it was going, because in that beginning, one of those beginning classes, we did a meditation where I ended up on the ceiling looking down at everybody. And that was like this massive healing crisis I had. At the time, I had no idea what was going on or how cool that was, other than it was super, super cool. And I couldn't figure out how to ever do it again. But that's where it all began, way back in this Qigong class where we did a healing meditation. From there, I studied Qigong and then got into foot reflexology a year later. And most of this was because I was someone who was deathly ill with allergies. Like I was hyper reactive to everything in the world. I was super, super congested and sick and tired constantly from that, along with all the other emotional stuff that I had been lugging along for years. So there was so much to uncover. And so it's from there, I studied foot reflexology. And then that was in 2002 with the premise at the time I was married, had 4 kids. I wanted to heal myself. I wanted to help my kids find their way to be as healthy as possible. And through there, I understood they piece together because they connect the meridians and all of like traditional Chinese medicine and how energy flows through. And that all just made so much sense to me. Eventually in 2008, I took my first Reiki class, and the Reiki class 1 and 2 I took in a couple months apart. And I look back, and after the second one, that empowered me to step into who I was, to leave my family and my husband, all of which was part of my path and I had to do to find myself and move forward. So that was really cool to look at that time frame. And then 2012, I studied integral energy therapy, which is more energy work, and then followed it with intention healing classes after that. And then at that point, I basically had it collected enough data where I could really anchor in to healing myself. Because for me, that stepping away, I was someone who my whole life was my family and my children. And so to depart from that was the break yourself apart into 1,000 pieces. And then I had to choose to stay on this planet, which was like a really big step for me because I was in and out of like depression my entire life. Yep. And so that was, and as soon as I empowered myself to stay, it just opened up the doors of all the emotional baggage that had made me so sick and was buried. I was diagnosed with cancer, and through radical forgiveness work, basically with my ex and finding a way to find compassion for the path we walked together, I was able to turn that diagnosis around where I didn't have to go through chemo, and it ended up just being a tumor that was repeatedly growing in my leg. So it's been fascinating. It's so cool to look back over it now because there's so many pieces on so many levels, and just looking at it now, it's like this masterpiece I created. So it's really cool to be able to step out and share.
Yeah. So thanks so much for coming on and really helping us open this part up and what self-healing is really about and what it does mean when you say yes and you say, okay, I'm going to heal myself. And just, I love the part about Reiki because everyone talks about Reiki. They're like, it's this sweet little beautiful thing. And then That was not my experience. I was like, oh, my whole life exploded after Reiki. Like everything blew up. So I love so much for me hearing that coming from another beautiful soul, being like, it empowered me to say, I'm important, I matter, right? Like, whew,
Right.
man.
Right. And make the hardest choices in your life based on how you've created the story. Now you're going to undo all of them
Right.
and do everything you swore you'd never do.
Yeah. I mean, it really does. I mean, healing ourselves really does break it, like you said, breaks us all the way down to the foundation and have a look at the foundation and saying, do I like this or no? And going forward, because you've been doing your swim coach and you've been like really busy your whole life too.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was coaching swimming and, I mean, at one point my days I would get up, I would have a whole bunch of kids come to my house, little toddlers and whatnot that I would care for with my kids. So I didn't have to go anywhere with my kids. And then they were all school teachers. So I'd have a house full of toddlers and infants for, for probably 6 a.m. until about 3 p.m. They'd go home. I'd pack up everybody, pack up dinner, and me and the 4 kids would go to the pool. And then I would coach from 4:30, 5 o'clock at night until 9 p.m. And then we go home and put everybody to bed and then we do it again. And on the weekends we had swim meets, which went from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So like, it was just, I don't know how I did that.
You're a generator, man. You're magical. You guys are magical unicorns.
Did. Well, and it's really interesting because I discovered another piece of stuff related to the human design recently. And looking back, so there's 2 big things that came up for me. My relationship with my mother has been anything but easy. I lost, my father was in a car accident when I was 15. And so he had already left our family and then he left the planet. So there's big abandonment issues. But then my mother, because of it, checked out mentally and emotionally because she couldn't handle what was going on. So there's all this stuff has been coming up and it's been like super, I just totally lost my train of thought of where I was going with this. Oh, so I've been going over coming forth on this podcast for me is like, I'm ready to come back out into the world, all these years of teaching. And then I sort of went in, had all these medical issues that allowed me to withdraw and basically hide, but it allowed me to like hyper focus on me, who I was, what I wanted to be, and what I want to bring forward, because my desire to serve the world is just insane. And it's always been there. So now as I'm going through some of these pages, and my mother is a projector, and I look back at teenage years growing up with a projector mother and the bitterness that would be expelled in all directions. And for me, I could do nothing but feel it. And to me, I'm like, her bitterness cut me open. I'm bleeding. I'm laying on the floor. I'm going to die and nobody's doing anything. And there I'm just like, but now I have such an understanding. I'm like, oh, that's just you not being you. And it sort of just erased everything, all the pain and suffering that was there, all the head banging we've done over the years, because now I completely understand that that's just her not being her.
Yeah.
And it's allowed me this space to just love her so much more and heal the one relationship I want. Because honestly, if I go back, when my father left the planet, my plan was to join him, period, whether it was here or there, because my parents had split and my mother and I had the most horrific smashing space. And so like all of this, it's just been amazing to be able to hold on to the gift of, oh no, I want to love you and I want to love everybody, but I have to love me first or I have nothing for anybody.
Yeah, that I have to love me first. So beautiful. And when you came to Reiki, for those who know, Kimberly came to Reiki and it was great. It was just so evident from your being. You didn't have to do anything. You just simply were. And your light just shone through and the way that you spoke and your messages were received was just so beautiful because, with me, at least how I perceived it and what resonated with me is the truth was so deep within you. Like you had really spent time. I was like, oh, this is really someone who really knows what the journey is like and is on the other side of that. If not all the way. I mean, I guess all the way we get to be like wherever we go, whatever wormhole we get to jump into next. But here we are to share that. And it was such a beautiful, incredible support and light, especially with the going through that stage of opening up on like watching all these new people like tune into themselves and they're like, oh, and we're like, have a snack, and be okay. And so what I kind of like, we talked a little bit about beforehand is like moving in and how, as you were saying, you were super allergic to everything and going in and how your emotions were tied to your physical ailments. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit and what that was like for you?
So for me, I connected with Louise Hay and this little book called Heal Your Body.
Yeah.
And I just started looking up all the different ailments that had shown up in my life, and every single thing I looked up, and she'd have her explanation of what it was. And it resonated. It's like, oh yeah, it's totally that. It's totally that. It just made such sense to me, to the point where at one point I wrote out 10 pages of the affirmations that are with that. And I would read it every day. I'm like, I just need to, I mean, most of them are all about, well, you need to love yourself, you need to accept yourself. And, you know, that's the biggest message that's in the bottom of all of it. But it was, I don't know, it was really interesting recognizing what I thought was like I thought, okay, I just need to be able to look at myself in the mirror, look myself in look into my eyes and go, I love you. And I'm just like, well, I can do that. That's no big deal, but I'm not feeling it. Right. And it's not in all the cells. And it actually wasn't until I was reading the book about messages in the water where that really clicked into me, because he talks about love and gratitude and its effect on water, and how it's kind of like H2O. You need 2 parts gratitude to 1 part love. And so for me, it came forth, well, you start with this level of having gratitude for everything around you in the world. And then you take that internally and you generate this love for yourself. And then the final step is when you step into that gratitude for every cell in your being, and how you are co-creating together with it and where that's taking you. So you have your 2 parts gratitude to 1 part love.
Yeah. You explained that so well. Thank you for that. That's amazing. It is. It's so much of that. And so like going through that and all the affirmations and getting there, when did you really know that things were moving and changing and you were healing? Did you have was there like an epiphany, an aha moment, or was it just like one day, like a couple months later, you look back and you're like, oh, hey, I'm a different me?
Well, right. Yeah. So for me, my journey involved a surgery in 2016 that created 24/7 pain on the pain scale of 0 to 10. And I was at a 15 to 20 every waking hour. And so the first big step for me was trying to survive during those 2-3 years when they were drugging me and basically telling me there's nothing you can do, and you're stuck with this and we don't know why it's happening. Right. So that, I think that was one of the biggest steps, because at that point it's like, okay, so I got up today and I made it to the bathroom and back, and I didn't scream and cry, and I just did it. So like you start with these little baby steps and figuring out how to recognize and celebrate. So for the longest time, like I had to step back, and the smallest little thing had to be the greatest celebration, for the day. But then the fast forward where I really started to recognize things were shifting was after I watched you on a YouTube podcast, and all of a sudden my hand starts losing its mind. And that's where everything just started snowballing at high speed for me. And I could really just, I don't know, the awakening was just insane. And I'm like, I've been awakening for years. This isn't like, but I didn't even realize it could reach the level at which it now has, like in this past year. It's just amazing. It's been insane.
Yeah. And so now you've really taken on quite like a mentorship guide and role for those that are walking this path. I know that that's kind of what we do in our tribe. Generally, we're like, hi, you need help. Come on. It's cool. We're going to help guide and do all that. And you've just been such a beautiful, I mean, I've just heard, people tell me about how connected and amazing you are, and how they've been able to really take in lessons and what you say, and they go, oh, right. And like that's the hardest part, being the guide when you get to the other side, right? Or a little further along the way, I guess you could say. Do we ever really get to the other side? I have no idea. But how is that for you? How is that transition coming from going through all of that and now like turning around and holding your hands out and saying, come along with us? How has that been for you?
Oh, pure magic. So I coached swimming for years. So I had the opportunity to be in the water, and it was never about the swimming. It was always, I always saw myself as a life coach. Like that's what I
That's
did.
awesome.
I connected with people, and we had the healing element of the water surrounding us. But whatever we were doing, it was just to empower this person on their journey. And that's what I've always done and how I've always viewed it. So for me to be able to step back out, but then not have the element of water surrounding me, right, is a whole new experience. But it's like, oh, but you can do this. Oh, but this is so easy. You don't have to have, every single element of all this just right. So you can do this, and understanding like the safety that I have in just the space now, because I've expanded myself as opposed to being this teeny tiny thing that was trying to exist, and all the fear that was I allowed, to surround myself. And now I feel like, oh, no, I can just expand out, and I can take my energy and do what I used to do with the water and surround myself and whoever I'm connected with that. And then it just creates this big hug for both of us. And then we can move forward in whatever way we're meant to.
Yeah. I love that so much even more. Yeah, that makes so much sense. You're just doing you, but more.
Yeah.
I love that.
And the other piece that's really come through recently is I'm starting to understand the elements of unity so much more. And I had a conversation with my brother the other morning, and we were talking about like how I want to just stand. I'm going to stand next to you, and I'm going to allow you to do whatever you need to do in this moment. And I have like letting go of all the agenda of all the programming from the years and years and years. And I can stand in a space, and I'm like, I want to completely hold the space. I'm standing next to you. I'm not trying to pull you along. I'm not trying to push you into anything. Everything's on you. I'm going to show you the other, like I feel like a person has this tunnel vision of where they think they're going. I want to show you all these other options. And then it's totally up to you. You can keep going where you were going, or feel free to branch out into any of these other possibilities if you feel led that direction.
Yeah. Isn't that the best?
Yeah, it is.
The best. And I always love watching people choose and then come back later and be like, I hated that. I'm like, you want to, yes, something different sounds great, but you chose, right? You made that
Right.
move. It's amazing. I love today, you guys. Oh my gosh. So we've been talking just on and on, not right now, but always since our moment of meeting, and really have just fallen in love. And we all have the same story behind how we want to co-create these beautiful communities, and we call them sanctuaries, whatever the word is, where we can come together. And so Kimberly is over on our New York ley line, which is so beautiful, and we've got quite a crew going over there. And so part of our plan is to go out and visit and play and help start that there too. And so what ideas, so when you look into the future of your life, right, when you're doing that beautiful dream weaving and everything, what are some things that you're really looking forward to coming to fruition?
There's so much.
Yeah. Name the first three right out the gate.
It's one of those things where there's so many infinite possibilities, I can't even anchor into one thing.
Joy.
It's just the connection and the walking forward in a community is what I think most excited about.
Yeah.
And it's just, I spent many years going, I love kids and I don't like people. And I'm in a space where like, I love people and I want to hear all their stories and I can't wait to share.
Yeah.
Like allow them to share everything that they've experienced with me. Like that's pure magic to me.
Yeah. Because everyone's adventure is so interesting and important, and wild and unique. Yeah, I love it. Sammy, you've been quiet for a while. Do you have things? She's letting me talk.
So I think for those out there, a lot of times we get listeners who are just kind of starting their journey, and you have just so much experience in so many things. And so I was wondering if you could just briefly explain a little bit about Louise Hayes and her concepts. Like, what is this? Talking about fear. My mom, let's say, she gets really, really scared about cancer all the time because a lot of people she knows have had cancer or go through cancer, and she tells me all the time, that'll be how I die. I just know it. That's going to be how I die, and she just lives in this constant state of terror of like, it's like Russian roulette for her every day. She's like, when's the day I'm going to wake up and get cancer? You know what I mean? And I think from you, and a lot of people live in that way, right? They're like, well, we're all going to get sick and die one day. So what's the point, kind of thing, is what I hear from a lot of people. And so for you, you had cancer. You went through that.
Yeah.
That was realized for you. And I think that I just kind of want to dive in more for people of how they can get themselves out of that state of terror and fear, and sort of give them some little notes to move forward with so it eases it a bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and I can, so here in this book, so cancer says it's deep hurt, long-standing resentment, deep secret, grief eating away at the self, carrying hatred. What's the use? And so from my perspective, how I came into this is I had been in a very dysfunctional marriage, right? Where there was we had both come from a place of a lot of trauma, and and from a human design perspective, right? So I stepped in a marriage with a reflector with this. So I carried a bit of disappointment. His non-self theme is disappointment. So that brought us together. And then I decided, being the generator, and I can work from morning, noon to night, I'm going to play superhero and I'm going to fix all of this. So I'm going to do everything I possibly can. So for me, it was, it was totally, what's the use? I had reached a point where I'm like, I know I have to exit. I exited once and it didn't work. And so then I had to go back, and then it was like, oh, your only choice is going to be to save yourself. Right.
Yeah.
So it was a complete place of what's the use and why am I even here? I can't serve my children. I wasn't able to save them from the situation. I can't save myself at this point. That's how I got to cancer. But so here, like, the affirmation for that is, I lovingly forgive and release all the past. I choose to fill my world with joy. I love and approve of myself. So I had to love and approve of myself. I had to find forgiveness, because for me, it's really hard to be upset with anybody. I don't like conflict. I don't like negativity. I don't like any of that stuff. And it sits really, I mean, I'm sure it's hard on everybody, but for me, it's indefinable to explain what that feels like to me. So I don't care what you've done to me. I'm going to figure out a way to love you. That's just how I've always been and where I want to get to. So once I discovered I needed to forgive and I needed to learn to love and approve of myself, I was immediately like, oh my gosh, you're holding so much resentment towards this man, which is now making you so sick. Again, which is where the radical forgiveness comes in. Mm-hmm. But now I've gone off on a very big tangent, and I don't feel like I'm addressing all the things that you asked for, Sammy.
No, so I think you addressed it beautifully. Yeah, I really do. Yeah. Yeah. I think so often our body gives us these clues, right? Our body says, like, hey, you've got a little ache in your back. And then it says, hey, now it's a bigger ache. And then it says, now you're coughing. And then it's like slowly, progressively giving us these cues, but we've been taught to sort of turn out from that and go, oh, what a weird ache and pain. I guess I'm getting older, and just kind of blow it off. You know what I mean? There's so many phrases for blowing off your body's cues, right? Like we are so ingrained, like, to do that. It was funny. I was watching a video and they've made these period cramp simulators for men. So men can
Yep.
like put them on and they can simulate what female cramps are like. And so they had the women do it first. The women put it on, and it
Tested
goes from a scale of 0 to 20. And so, the women were just sitting there and letting it, and they're like, yep, go up another level, go up. And they're all just like talking through it. And then it gets to about 15 and that gets a little harder. And they're like, yeah, this is definitely when like I wouldn't be able to go to work that day. They're walking it through it, and they put it on the men, and the men are at like 5, and they're like, how can you function with this? You know what I mean? And it's like, because we're so trained, and especially as women, we're so trained just to be like, nah, it's just my body. It's just my body. Don't worry about it. I've got these million things to do, and it starts at a very young age, I think, with the period of being like, well, periods are just something women have to go through, buck up and get through it, is kind of how we treat the menstrual cycle. And so women are taught at a very young age to like just not trust their body, that no matter what their body is saying or doing or feeling, they're just supposed to like, boop, it's okay.
Well, yeah. And when you do that and you do go to the doctor, they go, no, you're wrong.
Right.
You're incorrect. That's not possible. You're just tired. Or
well, there's nothing we can do to fix it. If you lost a little weight, maybe that's a lovely thing I always hear. Well, there's nothing we can really do to fix that. But if you lost a little weight, I bet your back would feel better. Or, well, if we'll give you this painkiller and that headache will go away. And it's like, yeah, but why do I have the headache?
Yeah.
I know I can slap some medicine in my body and make it stop, but like that doesn't solve. I'm still going to have the headache when I stop taking the medication. So,
yeah.
Do you want to hear headache? Headache is an interesting one. Headaches are invalidating the self-criticism, and fear.
There it is.
Yep.
So the second you're not living your path, it's like the head tells you, it goes, hi.
Yeah. And the mind always tries to be in control. So,
Yeah.
But the mind's like, okay, so I'm just going to give you this signal because, if it's all for me, we should probably redo this. I don't know.
Yeah.
So funny.
Well,
that's what I love so much about like Louise Hayes. And I know Usui Sensei, he has in his handbook, in his manual, he has, he came up with things and has all the hand placements and everything. And then there's Julia Cannon, and she talks a lot about, what I found so interesting about her journey is that she talks a lot about, she's like, but Louise Hayes has already done it. It's already out there. Like, why am I getting this call? And what I loved so much about the responses, and they said, what makes you think every single human body is exactly the same? Oh, listen to that. And that falls into just like, so Luckman talks a lot about in his Potentiate Your DNA. He was like, we are not all built the same. We don't all have the same genetics. We don't all come from the same places. Like, our bodies are going to have similar things because we're all humans, right? And so there's like that baseline, but not so much for the exact things in the schematics. So it's really cool. I also love that Louise Hayes has those affirmations, but just like you said, Kimberly, you have to really feel it.
Right.
That's the key, because you can say all you want, your minds can memorize, but when you feel it, and we talk about this all the time, emotion is the power, man. That's why they control us so much with advertising and marketing, because wherever our emotions go, that's where the energy goes and the intention and the power for it.
Yeah.
We're magical.
Would you say in your findings, when people, let's bring it back to human design, because I know that's something both of you know really well, and it's a journey that Allison's really set in right now. But would you say when people are living their not self theme is when they tend to start feeling that dis-ease in the body, when they tend to start acquiring, like, because that is the emotional signal, right? Like, our emotions give us the initial signal before our body has to be like, now I'm creating pain in you. So you would you say that's pretty consistent with your findings? Like, if people were to just listen to their emotions at the start, and then I talked to some people, sorry, now I'm going to immediately go into another thing, but then I talked to some people that say, well, my emotions are so big and I just don't know how to to ever get them to like subside or to ever find peace or joy or happiness, especially when I speak to people who are like severely depressed and they've been depressed for years and years, and now they've got like brain tumors, and you know what I mean? Like they're just like, oh, but I know that I need to understand my emotions and go through them, but when will they ever end? You know, is
Right.
what I hear a lot, especially from my beautiful water sign friends.
Well, that's really interesting, because for me, it was the emotions were a key piece, but it was what are your thought patterns? What is the language? What is the voice in your head saying? Because I mean, I've had years of depression, and I'm off all of my medication because there's a level of reprogramming with what language are you using, what words are you using, and how are you talking to yourself and others, that allowed me to gain more control of the emotion. So, okay, this emotion still feels big and bad, but I can remember one of the first times I went into my therapist, and she's like, okay, we need to find some middle ground for you. And I like, and I was going for PTSD because I had PTSD over my surgeries and my medical traumas,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Which that was a big eye opening thing, because she's like, oh, you have PTSD, and I'm just like, oh, this is PTSD because then I have it about this, and I have it about this, and I have it about this. It's like, okay, so now I have to restructure everything. But I can remember the day I went in and I'm like, okay, I know you want me to have middle ground, but I can stand here and now I have control. I can look over here where the things are bad, or I can look over here where they're, again, defined good or bad. So I have some level, I'm not finding middle ground, but I can stand in the middle, and I now can choose if how much time and energy am I spending over here looking at things that bring me joy? How much time and energy am I spending over here in things that don't bring me joy? And that is a choice that needs to be made if you're going to get out of, or at least I found, that depression. You have to get control of your head. And
So
it's totally.
perspective change is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And I think people, I'm just going to say it. I think people take the medication and they dive into the thing and they just think that something else is going to save them, when really it's all about their perspective changing and choosing that.
Yep.
And yeah, the medication can numb the symptoms, right?
Right. But it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't fix anything.
Mm-hmm.
It just allows you to keep pushing on, right, for a few more days.
Yeah.
And some people, I think just need that moment of respite, because it's so much that the medicine does help just for a moment to be like, even a breath of stillness, to be like, okay, at least I can get my bearings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think in the same sense, like the idea of why medicine came to be is that they really wanted to help people, but we don't really have the support or foundation for how to do the work. And, we're not taught that, or, I mean, for a long time, we weren't even allowed to even have emotions, for God's sakes. And then when bad things happen, you would have just like buckle up your bootstraps, or, all, you fall over and you don't cry about it. But then it's like all about learning that emotional regulation. And then it's like this whole thing, right? And so now we are kind of like this society. It feels like, anyway, to me, of they're like, I don't even know how to fix it. And I'm too busy to even do it, because I'm so busy trying to survive, to make sure I can feed and house and clothe my family, or even just myself, and all of that. It's a pretty wild ride, man.
Yeah, I've just realized when you've said that they have bastardized the emotional regulation to be no emotion at all. Well,
Yeah.
emotional regulation is when you don't experience emotion, is kind of like the message we're given.
Yeah.
That was so sorry. I am a complete novice in this topic. So I'm just going to go through this whole podcast being like,
I love that.
Cool.
That's what we get together, right? We all learn from each other, and that's why we're doing this. And I think it's so important to talk about all of these subjects, because we all are well versed in some things and novice in others, right? And if we can to come together and say, okay, I'm a novice in this and I want to learn more, but I'm an expert in this, right? So I can talk about this. I think it brings so much more openness to conversation in general, because it's hard to say you don't know. And I'm unsure. And I, and then because what's the response? Oh, take this pill. Oh, have this over here. Here's your quick fix. Here's your dopamine hit, or whatever. Right. And so people get into it. And this happens in my mentorships all the time. They get to a point and I go, you don't need me anymore. And they keep staying. And I'm like, you really don't need me anymore. But they never believe that. So eventually they leave, right? And then, I see them months or years later and I was like, you still don't believe in yourself, man. And they're like, I don't. And I was like, yeah, go back and watch all your stuff. Read all your notes. Go back to what you did. Teach that brain, and we don't really talk about that. And like I think that's why I can't even say this out loud, but that's why like ceremonies and rituals are so important for many human beings because it Jared talks about this all the time. It teaches us to relish the moment over and over and over again. And they do have those studies. My Reiki teacher does this really cool. She talks about one of the studies that I was just love so much, and it's what you look around. She goes, look for yellow, 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 and everyone spends all time looking for yellow, right? Close your eyes, look for red, and it's just such a quick way to say your brain, what you tell your brain to look for, it looks for. And just like you said, Kimberly, right in that you chose to look at joy, even though it's hard, even though you're like, there's like one thing over there, right? But there it is.
There's always one thing. And if you can find that one thing, you can find your way out.
Yeah, because that's another thing I've heard from friends and relatives who are really struggling with depression is like, I don't even see a good thing. There are no good things. And then I don't know how to help them because that's usually the path I go down is like, okay, well, as much as I love to listen to you vent for 5 days in a row about the same thing, let's focus on one thing you do want. So then, and this might be wrong. This is why I'm so happy to have the both of you here because you're both experts in this field. But like, so what my next step for them is, well, okay, if you can't see any good things, what do you want things to change to? So if there's nothing good at all, what would make your home life better? What would make your work life better? What would make, and then we kind of dream the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And then we focus on what we want that to be. And then I ask them to take a look at like, okay, so now that you've been thinking that you wish in your home life your husband would help you out around the house more, was there anything that he did that was helpful? And can you go to him and say, hey, honey, thanks for putting that dish in the dish. Thanks for putting your own dish in the dishwasher. I really appreciate you. Maybe it's something that small, right? Because when you're just starting, it's small, and then maybe you can build on that. But then I have people, sorry, and this is when I don't know what to do because that you can at least work with someone. But then I have people who say, it doesn't matter what I dream for the future to make it better because it's never going to happen.
Mm. So then can you find a memory from the past that brings you joy and just bring it into right now? Because it's all about the feeling and giving yourself permission to feel something else.
And your brain doesn't know the difference. Your brain doesn't, because your brain can't tell time. It has no idea. It can't tell what's real and what's not. Yeah.
And everybody carries at least one good memory of something where they were so overjoyed. You just have to find it. Because sometimes and like for me, so with my struggle with depression, I'm like 100% against medicine. And when I finally chose to take the medication was when my system stabilized enough so I could start making progress forward. So I did the one thing I didn't want to do, but it 100% worked because it allowed me to move in ways that I wasn't going to be able to because there was too big of a wall that I was struggling with.
Yep.
This is big, you guys.
Yeah. Healing is not for the faint of heart. I mean, you really, and then it's once you do that, you've got to really like work on the structure of your support, who supports you, and watch everyone run away.
Yeah.
Because you vibrated out of their frequency.
Or notice what they're actually, the motives behind what they're doing. I think that happens for a lot of people too. They'll come back and they'll be like, I didn't realize this person was taking advantage of me. But now that I'm aware and awake and, living my own truth, I'm like, oh man, whoops. Yeah.
What a ride.
this is the stuff that they should be teaching to the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. There should be a class for this, right? Where you come in and you're like,
100%. Yeah.
like, why is this not? Just like I always say, like, why is taxes not a required class in high school? Like, why is emotional regulation and getting to know, how to chase happiness not a class? Like,
Yeah, well, that's the whole thing, right? I'm going to go back to human design because, everything's going to tie into human design now. So sorry about all of you who aren't interested in this at all. It is all, Rauru and many of his other, I'm going to use the word disciples, even though it's like so wrong, it makes it extra culty, but it's that where they picked up his mannerisms and words, right? Because that's typically what happens when you pick up your teacher's words, whether you want to or not. And how they use, for generators, they use the word slaves over and over and over again. And so Jared and I were watching something this morning and he was like so fired up about it. He was like, I hate that they use the word slaves. He was like, they're not slaves. They're human beings too. They have every right. And I was like, wow, you're getting real mad about this, but why, right? Why is the why? And there's that emotional regulation in there and how we're not taught, we're all kind of in this existence of the society, which is why it's breaking down to just get up and go and do. And it's an illusion of togetherness, but it's not really, because we don't follow our own joy. And that's really what togetherness is all about. But you're right. We need classes. We should do that. We're gonna start
maybe we should just start hosting an online Chase Your Joy.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so let us
cool.
know. We'll be starting an online Chase Your Joy. We're going to start out with adults because adults are safe. And then when we get through all the rules and regulations and the laws and make sure it's properly vetted, we will add the children in, because I don't know if you guys know this. There's a lot of work to do to help children, and they're in there for a reason, because it's all about protecting them. So, and I think that's what's so hard, because everybody wants to help, but like, man, is it? And I'm glad you have to go through hoops, because I've seen some charter schools go down in flames because they didn't, but because there are a lot of laws that weren't. And that's why we have them, right? Because adults can't adult. But I bet if we learned from a young age how to do that. What is emotional regulation? Oh, it means you sit with your emotion and you go through it and you work through it, and there's other there to support you if that's what you want, or figure out what your design is, or all of that. And I think that's something that, I know Kimberly and I have talked about it in depth in that way, when we're like, yes, is that being able to just be that sounding board in that space and that metronome, and saying, yeah, freak out, man, get at it. Like, whatever you need to do, it's okay. Let's do it. Let's start that. Okay, we're starting that, you guys. Be on the lookout.
We will discuss the details.
We have so many things coming up in 2023. I know we really haven't talked about a lot, because it gets away from us if we do.
Yeah.
It only becomes work for the projector, and then I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. That sounds like work.
Yes, but I'm here to work.
I know.
Yeah, I'm here to
show
work,
up,
so.
and I'm here to work.
Yeah, you got 2 worker bees under you right now. So.
Calling Pinkie Pie. Where is Pinkie Pie? There she is. Bring her in. I'd like to come down on a balloon. Maybe glitter. I don't know. Yeah, and I think that's something that's so beautiful too. And Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on and really speaking your truth today, because it really is about us regular, everyday human beings rolling around on this planet, doing our own work, and then coming together and saying, that person has the same vision as I do. And like, oh, I want to, I want to be able to be there for that person, or just sharing and all of that. And it is so hard to use our voice, I think, because we're not really taught, and this is what, my daughter, she just took a mental health day today, even though she's like, I know I only have like 3 more days of school and then I have a break, but there's a substitute and I'm just not really feeling engaged. And I really just want to be home in the quiet when no one else is here but you. And I was like, and it's so funny to me, because I was like, you don't have to give me a reason. You can just say, I don't want to.
Yep.
And she's like, but I have to. And I was like, no, you don't. Like, yourself. And that's what we're trying to teach with our kids, is yourself and your body, like, trust what that is. And, I think it is hard sometimes, because, there's this thing called truancy. I'm that set up to keep kids safe, right? Because if they're
Right.
suddenly not going to school for like weeks on end, you're like, hi, where's this child? What happened to them,
It's that second set of like adults that's like, hey, we want to make sure your kid is safe and happy too.
Yeah.
In order to do that, we've got to see their faces.
Well, and I think, Kimberly, that's why you're talking about probably why it feels like that's why you're so moved. Like it was just bring everybody here. I know where my kids are. I know these kids are taken care of, and all the teachers are like, I can trust this lady. You know what I mean? They could leave and go do their thing. And, there's something about that coming collectively together as the divine feminine and divine masculine in our own way and supporting that collective growth. Plus it teaches us it's really fun to watch an 8-year-old and a 17-year-old like help a 3-year-old emotionally regulate, help them go through their emotions and like just watch them try to like do it. Right. And they have and then allow them to explore their own way. And you're just like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to like adult this too much, but I don't know. But then we do all that tutoring. And sometimes you like my favorite thing Sammy does, it gets like crazy. But I love to watch that. It amps up. And then all she does is her little clap thing. But because they know to respond to that it's important, right? So you teach them how to respond with sound and everything. I don't know. And everyone calms down. It's really neat. Our brains are cool, you guys. I just went on a tangent about nothing too. Thanks for sharing that moment with me.
I feel like 12 times a day I want to say thank you for coming to my TED Talk about nothing.
Yeah.
There were nuggets of truth in what you were just saying, but when you said that, it was so relatable. I was like, I do that all the time, and then I stop talking, and I'm like, wait, what was?
I don't know. It's channeled messages coming through. Well, you're gonna be, I guess. So you guys are gonna be seeing more of us together because we're gonna do this thing now, Kimberly. Check your inner authority and feel that out for our sacral friends. Wait, is it a sacral? Is it emotional authority? No, emotional authority is from this. Oh my gosh, it's from the solar plexus. That breaks my brain every time.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Bye!